Right, well, thank you for having this chat again. It's obviously surrounding the Online Safety Act in regards to gaming, and a lot of feedback that I've had through our previous interview when we talked about Play Safe ID, and it only came to my knowledge through yourself, Andrew, mentioned it coming on the 24th of July. So, I've kind of got some follow up questions just to touch on. First one being, how does the Online Safety Act change like the legal responsibilities for companies? Because you've got mass companies, you've got the big guns, and then you've even got smaller companies that still need to abide by this. How does it affect the tech companies in the UK from a procedural standpoint, what they need to do? Because I just quickly want to open that up a bit more. I see on like Discord, there's one ID verification system. On this other company, there's a different one. How do they all interlink, and what's their, what effect does it have on them?
Couple of bits to unpack. So, first of all, this doesn't impact companies in the UK. This affects companies globally
Mhm.
who have links to the United Kingdom. So, users in the United Kingdom or the United Kingdom forms part of their commercial strategy that they have children within the United Kingdom that access their product or service, or their product or service is one that children in the United Kingdom might find appealing.
Mhm.
So, this is a global thing, not just a UK
Got
thing.
you. Yeah.
That's the first portion. The second thing is the change of legal responsibility in that it now is. Before it wasn't, now it is. They have a legal responsibility to ensure that children are protected from illegal content harms and content that is harmful to children, which are two different categories of things. So illegal content is very self-explanatory, and harmful content is split into three tiers. There's primary priority content, which is pornography, suicide, self-harm, and eating disorder content.
Yeah.
There's priority content, which is bullying, abuse, hate, etc., etc., and then there's something called NDC, which is basically just a catch-all for everything else.
Cut.
So companies now have a legal responsibility to. There's four video games specifically. I'll pull it up now because I can't remember all of them off of the top of my head verbatim, but there's seven categories of recommended codes of practice that they have to implement. One of them is implementing highly effective age assurance, which you've touched on. And various companies are doing this in different ways. Like you say, they're choosing different providers, whatever. They don't interlink. So it's not that they're all talking to each other
Got
or
you.
they're all
Yeah.
figuring it out. Any one company is deploying any number of highly effective age assurance measures. Usually it's age estimation in order to understand the actual age of the user. So let me just go through the codes of recommended practice really quickly at a high level, and then I can dial into highly effective age assurance and I can answer that question in more detail.
Mhm.
Do interrupt me if I'm waffling too
No,
much, though,
please
because
do. More insight is better.
it's an enormous topic. So basically, what they have to do, their legal responsibility is they have to do a children's access assessment. So, do you have children accessing your game or service? And it's worth noting that they can't turn around and say that we don't unless you have highly effective age assurance in place to prove that you don't.
Yeah.
So, they have to put this measure in place. They then have to do a children's risk assessment, which is what are the functionalities and what are the areas of our product or service or platform or whatever it is that children might encounter either illegal content or content that is harmful to children. So either those primary priority content, so pornography, suicide, self-harm, or whatever, priority content, bullying, abuse, or whatever. So they need to do all of these assessments. And then what they need to do is they have to deploy highly effective age assurance. So, and Ofcom give a wide variety of things that could be
Yeah.
viewed as highly effective, but they don't tell people what is highly effective. So most companies at the moment are actually deploying age estimation. Okay, so you just take a selfie, it broadly guesses what your age is, and then it scrubs your personal info. So there's no record of you, there's nothing stored, and they can just kind of go, okay, you're clearly over 18, or you look about 14.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with this is that the actual law itself, the bill, the Online Safety Act of 2022, specifies that it has to be, whatever the highly effective age assurance method is, it has to be technically accurate, reliable, robust, and fair. One of the challenges that is being seen at the moment is, first of all, age estimation is wildly inaccurate.
Hmm.
It can say 18-year-olds are 13, it can say 14-year-olds are 23,
Yeah.
it's very, very inaccurate. So that's the first problem. And the second problem is it doesn't fucking work when people can take a Death Stranding photo
Yeah.
mode picture, right? Because
Yeah.
that fails the technical accuracy, reliability, robustness, and fairness. Like it doesn't, it's not actually working. So I think this is going to be an interesting point, specifically on the highly effective age assurance and the type of company and the type of measure that's employed. Because it's like doing an age estimation check is super cheap. It's
Mm.
quite easy to integrate. It comes with a lot less personally identifiable information responsibility because you're scrubbing the data after the verification. However, if the fine is £18 million or 10% of global turnover, and people can use photo mode to bypass your system, it's obviously failing the measure.
Yeah. Which then still would lead to
You
that
could get
fine
hit
and
with
that
that
problem.
fine.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're not actually solving anything. So the other things that companies need to do, they have a legal responsibility to do. This is specifically a shortlist that I put together for video games, because there's different categories of companies and stuff like that. So video games are user-to-user internet services.
Mhm.
So they have different rules to social media companies or companies with content recommender system or companies that are search engines. So the codes of recommended practice include governance and accountability for your service. So they have to have a child protection officer now. They have to have written statements of responsibilities, tracking evidence of new and increasing harm to children on their platform over time. Codes of conduct regarding protection of children or harmful content and compliance training. They have to implement highly effective age assurance, which we've already spoken about in some detail, but I can go more into that if you want. Content moderation, they have to have a function to review and assess suspected content that's harmful. They have to have a function that allows swift action. They have to have internal content policies, performance targets, prioritization, resourcing, provision of training materials for people that are working on content moderation internally, reporting and complaints. You have to now enable people to complain if they think that there's harmful content on the service. You have to have easy to find, easy to access, and easy to use complaint systems and procedures, provision of information prior to the submission of a complaint, appropriate action sending incentive timeframes. There's like 30 things on reporting and
Yeah.
complaints, settings and functionality, user controls, terms of service, a bunch of others. So there's a lot of things that they need to do.
Yeah.
That was very waffly and
So
rambly,
can
but
you I suppose from a company's perspective, they appreciate that this legislation has came in and they're trying to amend their policies and put the processes in place to abide by said legislation. But even just by that list, then, and Ofcom stating this is the realm and not what to do. I suppose that can lead to a lot of the confusion and that these verification systems.
no, so the realm is
Mm.
very clearly what can be viewed as highly effective age
Yeah,
assurance. In terms of the codes of recommended codes of practice, that's not a realm, that's a checklist. So
got
that
you.
it's very clear you have to do these things.
Yeah,
One of the things you have to do is have highly effective age assurance, and highly effective age assurance may be
yeah,
a credit card check, an age estimation, a photo ID check, using a reusable digital identity provider, and a couple of others are listed.
got you.
So that's the bit they're being broad about.
Yeah,
Is the yeah,
got you.
but
Yeah.
the rest isn't broad. It's very
Yeah.
specific.
I mean, I think you mentioned it with the age check-in and using a game and the photo to do the verification, but it was coming across like critics have raised concerns about the potential overreach and censorship of people's data. And I know we've touched this in the past in regards to PlaySafe and the systems that you're going to be acting, but do you see it, or can you comment on, the safety with the right, the freedom of expression and being able to say, no, I don't want you to have my data? What would that mean for those people that like, look, I like to use this service? Does it just mean outright, nope, you can't use it? This is how it's going to be.
So companies and tech providers and service providers aren't preventing people from accessing their product and service.
Mm.
They're preventing people from accessing the harmful content within their product or
Okay.
service.
Yeah.
So, for example, on Reddit, on Discord, etc., you're only asked to verify if you're a user that's based in the UK and the first time that you're discovering not safe for work content.
Yeah.
That's when it goes, oh, we need to check that you're over 18. So you can still use Discord, you can still use Reddit, you just can't access the
That
not safe for
element
work
of
and
it.
content bit, which is why you have to verify yourself before accessing pornography, because all of pornography is harmful content. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
you can't come in before. So the other thing as well is the actual law itself, the whole of the Online Safety Act bill, and all of the statements and comments from Ofcom. None of it is about saying there should be less harmful content. None
Hmm.
of it saying that people should or shouldn't say whatever.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
whole focus of it is just that if the user is a child, they should be protected from this harmful content. So you can say whatever you want, you can do whatever you want. Just if you're 13 years old, you probably shouldn't be able to have unfettered access to an unlimited amount of pornography, suicide content, self-harm content, etc. And companies need to make sure that they put measures in place to protect kids from this kind of stuff.
That's a good point, because
It's
not
very well intentioned.
yeah, it's not limiting our freedom of speech and the way that we express ourselves. Like you say, it's just that substrata of people on that particular platform. If you're underage, look, you can't access this. You know, there's a number of questions that have kind of been answered within the specifics that we've already spoken about. But how how much impact do you think this will have on smaller businesses, smaller companies who need to operate by this legislation? Because I know you mentioned one area of it is cheap, but I can still imagine there's still quite a a big cost that might come into this, like say procedures, the right necessary people, the officers doing the child checks. Like, what impact would it have on a startup?
Specifically a video game, like a startup
Yes. There's a
developer or
brand new
someone.
startup dev
Yeah.
company out the UK wanting to make a video game, but it has open VoIP, open text channels, and obviously they need to ensure that child accessing this game is protected. What effect do you think it would have on them with the big cost that they may already have? Yeah, what
So
effect would it have?
so my recommendation would be you would do a children's act assessment first. So are you making the type of game that a child would find appealing? Like,
Mhm.
are you making like a colorful kind of like
Yeah,
cartoony game, or are you doing Dead by Daylight?
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
because you're going to have a lot less children that would find Dead by Daylight appealing than My Little Pony.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So there's obviously a spectrum there. So it's basically going, is the type of game likely to be appealing to children? For all users that come with a UK IP address, um, I would basically look to either disable text and VoIP chat,
Hmm.
or enable text chat for everyone, but force profanity filter on, and nobody
Yes,
can turn it
turn it
off.
off. Yeah.
Because Ofcom's already identified that the highest risk functionality is with user-to-user communication. It's direct chat, group chat, voice chat.
Hmm.
And if you say to if you say to another user, you should go kill yourself, right? They confirmed to me on an interview on a Q&A session that would constitute suicide and self-harm content. So that then puts you within scope. So I would make sure that I have some kind of moderation tool, some kind of moderation suite, whether that's Modulate for voice chat or GGWP or whatever it is. And they're all free for small and indie
Got
developers,
you.
right?
Okay, that's good.
Every kind of tool provider is free for indies.
Yeah,
Not all, but most.
yeah.
So I would put the moderation stuff in place. I would force profanity filter on, and I would turn off VoIP until and then if you wanted to turn the profanity filter off, or if you wanted to use voice chat,
Hmm.
you would then have to go through this highly effective age assurance process. I think that's the way that would have minimal impacts to the regular service. Like, it
Hmm.
wouldn't be very disruptive.
Yeah, of course.
Like, people can still text chat to each other. Profanity filters on, it's not the end of the world. VoIP isn't there, but it's not the end of the world. It would firmly put you in the camp of being shown to being compliant, doing the checks that you need to do, be following the spirit and the letter of the law, and making a real conscious effort to try to legitimately protect children,
Hmm.
whilst not putting too much friction and too many roadblocks in the way of users.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would do if I was making a game. And then we've got a guide that I've put together. I would sit down and go through that guide, not being biased and wanting to promote it. Genuinely, it took me 2.5 weeks of reading, and I'm really good at reading legal stuff, right?
Hmm.
I've done a lot of legislative stuff and compliance stuff and policy stuff. It took me 2.5 weeks of 12-hour days, really hard reading and taking notes and unscrambling it, because something will reference something that will reference something that will reference
Yeah.
something.
Go down the
It
rabbit
isn't a
hole.
chronological. Yeah, it's not a chronological decent read. It's all just reference all over the shop. So you have to read the whole thing before and follow all of these references before you have a fucking idea what's going on. And only at that point can you then read it a second time and actually know what you're reading.
Hmm.
And then you can read it a third time and then you actually understand
Yeah.
what you're reading.
Sounds like the film
Um,
Inception.
It is. It really is. You have to
To
keep
keep
going
watching.
deeper and deeper to understand what. Yeah. So what I did was I read it all, and basically what I did is I restructured it all and only included the stuff that's relevant for video games,
Yeah.
and I turned it into a chronological decent read. So like. What is it? Why do I need to care about complying? What do game companies need to do? The types of content that it's regulating and why, the risk factors to specific games and a list of those risk factors and what you need to do about it, the codes of practice and recommended measures that you need to do based on you being game, and what you actually have to practically implement. And I've linked to every single like relevant point. Like if I mention a
Yeah.
piece of the legislation, I link to it as a reference, but it's within this read. So
And that's
yeah,
on playsafe.com, isn't it? I'll put a link to that. Is that the one that you
it's
sent me?
it's it's on our documentation, so it's
Brilliant.
docs.playsafeid.com.
I'll
But
put that in the description if people want to go and take a look. Ofcom, and it's the way that you say it's put things across. What you mentioned, the £80 million fine and things. Was it 18 million or 10? I can't remember.
18,
18
18,
million, and then 10% of
or
GDP.
10% global turnover,
Got you.
whichever's bigger.
Got
Yeah.
you. And that is the straight cut penalty if a company then isn't compliant within this act, or that other
I would
ramifications
say
involved.
more specifically for a company that isn't compliant and has been negligent and hasn't taken any of the steps or any of the
Hmm.
measures to attempt to be compliant. I think that if you've done the risk assessment, you've done the access assessment, you've taken a stab at doing this, you've done some or most of the effort to it. If you still have problems, I think Ofcom would be like, okay, let's like try and help you solve these. You're obviously trying here. I think it's the companies that haven't done any of the access assessments, any of the risk assessments. They haven't put highly effective age assurance in place. They've not researched it. They've not approached any vendors. They've not tried to implement anything. If those companies have issues, I think that's when Ofcom goes, we need to make a point
Yeah, yeah,
of you.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. I suppose probably the biggest point for me and what I've come across, because I still beg the question. I still try and want to understand, like, yeah, these legislations in place. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I want to make sure that the world is safe and fair, but certainly doesn't censorship free speech and what people believe in. Because I believe that if you're upfront and honest, that's the best policy to have. Um,
Agreed.
I suppose the question that I'm trying to ask is, people are viewing this. What's your message to people that view this as this big government conspiracy, gaining all this data and insight on people, on platforms, the way that they operate, to then use against them? Because I'll put my point on it. When you look at it from an individual point of view, and it's quite controversial, you're not that important. When it comes to things like this, me as a 32-year-old adult, and I want to play video games, I'm not that important. They're not going to do you've got to look at the bigger picture and who it protects. What is your message to people that see it as like, I'm not using these services, then I'm not signing up, I'm not putting my ID across. I care about my data and my privacy because the government are this big bad wolf. What's your message to those kinds of people?
Firstly, I completely sympathize with them
Hmm.
because this is a spectrum question, right? It
Yeah,
depends
yeah.
on what your own internal policy is,
Yeah,
like
of
your own
course.
internal feelings and what you're willing for. It's also about a trade off. Okay. So if you're very strong on data privacy and data security and you don't want to give this information up in any regard, like not even like your passport,
Hmm.
but like just taking a selfie, then fair enough. Don't use those products and services.
Yeah.
Like fair enough. Like I've got nothing. I don't think you're stupid. Like it's what you
Your own
believe. It's
given
how you
right,
feel
isn't
about
it?
it.
Like how you feel, yeah.
That's completely fine. Um, on the flip side, there are people who are like, especially parents of young children who are like, this is fantastic because I was really worried about my now 12-year-old son, for example, discovering, porn and having unlimited access to pornography. And actually, the fact that he's being protected from that and can't gain access to that
Mm.
or can't gain access to that as easily, it's probably a good thing. So it depends who you ask. There's a million different people. But first of all, the government isn't getting any of this information. The KYC provider or the age estimation provider or whatever kind of verification partner that companies are deploying, they're the data processor. So they're performing this function.
Yes.
So and then the company is the data controller. So,
Mhm.
for example, if you make a video game,
Mhm.
you are the data controller, and the person that you're doing the verification is the data processor. So, you're the only two people that see the information. So, the government doesn't see any of this information. For age estimation, where it's just a quick selfie and then it's guessing the age of the user, first of all, I don't recommend deploying that because, yes, it's the least amount of friction for users, but it doesn't work. It's not accurate. It's not reliable. It's not robust. It's not fair. It doesn't fit within the framework of the legislation. You're just going to have to change again later.
Yeah.
However, people are using this at the moment and they are getting away with using this at the moment. So, cool. Um, the data gets scrubbed after the check. So you take the selfie, it guesses your age, and then it scrubs the data. So you're not actually giving any information. You're just kind of letting it guess the age of your face and then
Yeah.
move on. So I don't think that this is part of some big global conspiracy or some big bad conspiracy for governmental overreach in terms of tracking people and hoarding their faces and their data. I do completely sympathize with people who don't want to do it because they think it's invasive.
Yeah.
Fine. I
Yeah.
it is quite invasive, but it's invasive, I think, for a reason that's if it's done right, I think it's invasive for a good reason.
Mm.
You can't prevent children discovering eating disorder content, suicide content, self-harm instruction content, and serious pornography and stuff like that if you don't know the age of users. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's just a precursor to being able to put measures in place to protect kids. So
And I think from a a parental standpoint, it's I've had a few discussions with people. And it's just like well, kids shouldn't be It's almost like it's the parents' fault, and that's who they think. Oh, well, this is coming because parents aren't monitoring. You can't monitor your children 24 hours a day, and even when you do, and you put rules and regulations in place for discipline, and like, look, please don't do this. This is the reasons why I'm caring about you. We've all been kids. You always try and find a way, and you're slightly rebellious, and you want to expose yourself to the new realms of life. That's growing. But yeah, it's interesting from what I see. I'm just gaming, for example, but it's interesting what I see when these things come out, and it is like, well, it's a parent's fault, and it's sad
and
because
everybody that says that doesn't have children.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. That's a job within
I
itself,
guarantee you.
like because I've put, for example, our little one's phone, our little one. She has a phone from a safety perspective. She's nearly 10 now. She goes away on the weekend to her dad's house and that, and we have given her a phone if ever she needs to contact us and be like, "Look, mom, can't. I want to come home," things like that. So I've tried to take the necessary steps on an iPhone with app control, no access to Safari. Yes, she's got a WhatsApp, but she's only got numbers of direct family and things like that. And at first, I was like,
Me
yeah,
and the missus were talking about this last night about in the future when
yeah,
we come across this,
yeah.
and that's exactly how I was
And
describing doing it. Yeah.
I felt you almost feel a guilt doing it at first because like you want to see this as like, right, this is a blessing. This is a safety device. She's not using it for any social thing or taking fancy pictures. It's literally, if you need us, you can contact us. And I was putting these things in place, and I thought I nailed it. And I'm quite tech savvy. What I realized was with the app, and this is, I'm just trying to look at the perspective of parents and what you have to go through in the levels. Um, with the access to Safari, I thought I'd completely disabled it to begin with. But what it happened was it was actually just set to just a 5 minute usage. So for 5 minutes, she could go on Safari unprotected. And we have a big thing, and it's not out of it. We just don't want her on TikTok. It's short form content. You don't know what's going to come up on the
Infinite
next
scroll.
flick. Yeah. And to be
Yeah.
quite honest, what the chemical imbalance and the things that it does to a child's brain, like she doesn't need that yet. She can make that own decision
Yeah.
as she gets older. Um, and yeah, she was accessing TikTok through Safari for 5 minutes a day. And even that 5 minutes was like, oh, I'm just going to, I just want to text Nanny to say thank you for the weekend. And in that 5 minutes of her texting, and you're there, like, you're just washing up after dinner, you get the phone back. And then she started coming up with these TikTok trends. And I'm like, but where do you watch TikTok? And it clicked. And I
Yeah.
asked her, do you use it on your phone? She was like, yeah. And then I had to go in and truly limit it. So it's easily done. It's easily, you can't know everything to stop these things from happening to protect your kids. But
Fun fact.
mhm,
So there was a thing that I was reading, and I went down a rabbit hole with this about a child behavioral psychologist and developmental psychologist, and they basically noted the rate of screaming and tantrums of kids being dropped off at school was increasing like exponentially. And they were like, why is this happening? And the first line of thought was it was extra dependence on mum or
Yeah,
family or
yeah.
whatever. It isn't. It's they know that when they get dropped off, they don't have access to the iPad anymore. It was a withdrawal response to I I'm losing access to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thing that I now chemically depend on
Yeah.
for my dopamine hit throughout the day. So,
Oh, that's
yeah,
scary,
I
isn't
think that
it?
devices are yeah, but this is the thing is anybody that isn't a parent will turn around and just go, "Oh, the Online Safety Act is bollocks." And the thing is, Ofcom's done a really bad job of communicating what it actually is and why it actually matters. And
Mhm.
the fact that it doesn't go to limit the amount of content that you say. If you want to still be a prick online, you can still be a prick online. It's just making sure that 12-year-olds can't hear you being a prick
Yeah, yeah,
online.
yeah.
It's making sure that if you go say, "Oh, go kill yourself in a video game," that a 12-year-old, or if you're like giving descriptions of like, "Oh, do this," or self-harm yourself, or whatever, that kids are protected from your
Doing that.
knobheadery. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Us as
So it's
adults, we can differentiate between like, if someone says something like that, it's like, well, we know that's wrong. But as a young, impressionable child, as they're growing, as they're learning, the more that they're prone to that type of behavior, they can then mimic themselves. Because that's what we do as kids, as growing up. They say you're your greatest teachers, your parents, and children will mimic their parents from a learning perspective. So I think the less that they're exposed to that, which is what this is, for the better. But like you say, if you still want to go online and do those types of things, credit to you if that's what you want to do. Nobody's stopping you. It's just literally putting that door up, going, these words and these
there
actions.
is now a legal
Yeah,
responsibility for the company to ensure that children are protected from this type of
yeah.
content. That is all the Online Safety Act is. Yes.